Digital 410 Productions proudly presents the Fail to Fail podcast with your host, Don Abernathy.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the Fail to Fail podcast, the Digital 410 Network's motivational podcast. And I know it's been a while. As we all know, the world's gone crazy. Things are getting tough. I've been on lockdown for about 2 weeks now, which I know I can't complain because there's states like New York and California and other towns and cities and governments and hamlets and villages that have been on lockdown for a lot longer than we have, so I'm not complaining. Our guest today, I've been actually trying to get him on for a while prior to the illness that has taken over the world that's causing us all so much strife and life changes. He had actually been dealing with some illness prior to that. And so I've been actually trying to get this gentleman on the phone with us for a while. And I'm very excited that he's able to spend some time with us today. But before we get to that, we got to get to the other things. Look, I know people are losing their jobs, they're losing their hours, and so I'm not going to hit you over the head with asking you to sign up for Patreon. I'm not going to ask you to buy t-shirts. I'm not going to ask you for any money. I am going to say thank you to the kind people at Computers for continuing to sponsor all the podcasts here on the Digital 410 Network. You guys allow us to continue doing what we do, and we thank you for that. And so with that being said, for you business owners out there, if you have clients working from, or employees for that matter, working from the home and you're not using a program such as, I don't know, Go to My PC, TeamViewer, Splashtop, what have you. If you're using remote desktop, that works, but you're really opening up your network to some security liabilities. And if you're adamant on continuing to use the remote desktop, please get hooked up with Duo 2-form authentication, and that Computers can help you out with that. Super cheap. It's like $5 a month. And obviously, with everybody working at home, computers and internet being more important than they ever have been, hackers are going to try to attack your network with ransomware. So make sure, whether it's through Computers or somebody else, you're backing up online so that if you do get encrypted, you have a safe backup stored off-site. And the best way to do off-site backup that is continuously up to date is online backup, and Computers can help you out with that too. Computers 239-283-1120 or act-capecoral.com, or you can find them on Facebook. And another thing, it won't cost you a dime, quarter, nickel, or penny. I guess we could just do the... Please check out our YouTube channel. I have been going crazy the last couple of days uploading videos. We have all kinds of videos up there now, but just simply look for Digital 410 on YouTube. And please like, subscribe, click the bell. But most importantly, just subscribe. We got to get to 1,000 subscribers, and we're far, far away. So if you want to help us out, go to youtube.com, look for Digital 410, or simply go to d-410.com and click on the YouTube link. And I think fail2fail.com has some videos up as well. But enough of all that. Let me just say before we bring on our guest, here's hoping that this thing gets done quickly. Here's to those that we know who have passed away or have suffered extreme illness. Right now, someone I used to work with in radio, she was the secretary. The autopsy's still waiting to come back. Prior to her passing overnight, no one knew if she had COVID. She never said anything about not feeling well. We just know that she posted on Facebook on the 2nd, and on the 4th, she had passed. So we're waiting for the autopsy report on that, but I do know someone else in my social circle who has passed from COVID-19, and I know somebody who's been in the ICU for a few weeks. So prayers to everybody all around the world who has suffered or knows someone who has suffered, or family members who have suffered from COVID-19, whether it's through simply illness and or death. We can only pray that those numbers get smaller and smaller as the day goes by, and that we can all, the rest of us, stay healthy. And I hope you guys, if you haven't done so already, hopefully you're either maintaining your workout regimen and your running regimen, or you're getting into it now. But that's it. You're going to be happy to know that this podcast is not about health. It's not about exercise. It's about something cooler. And so let's bring on Neil. And as everything goes nowadays with social distancing, joining us live via Skype is another gentleman I went to school with. He graduated a year after I did. But we haven't actually spoken in probably 26 years in real life or in person. But this gentleman has done some very exciting and very interesting stuff with his life, and I'm amazed at some of the things he's doing. I'm going to let this conversation progress naturally. I don't want to let any cats out of any bags. But joining us via Skype is Mr. Neil Doppes. Doppes? I can't.
Yes, Doppes.
Doppes. I don't know what just the hell happened. I've just had a brain fart. Neil Doppes. I mean, we used to hang out, for God's sakes. I mean, you're a popular cat in school. Neil Doppes. Wow. I just had you know what the problem is? I made dinner tonight, and my daughter was setting the table, and she asked me if I needed a drink. I said, no, I got a beer. And I came in, and she thought I said, no, get me a beer. And so I had 2 tall boys for dinner, and I'm halfway through my second one. So this ought to be an interesting podcast, because after all, she cracked the second one. You can't let beer go to waste. You sure as hell can't pour it down the sink during a pandemic. That's just a crisis in itself. So what do? Neil Doppes.
That's a fact.
Neil Dopples. Like the radar.
Hell, if I knew I could have a beer, I'd have brought one with me.
Oh, hey, man, this is a podcast. And once again, we're in a pandemic. Things are getting better. For the first time since this started at the main grocery stores, they actually had toilet paper and paper towels on the shelf. So I was able to buy toilet paper without doing some backroom drug deal. The last time I was able to get toilet paper, I had to do it at Dollar General because I knew the people, and they sent me to the back room, and it was like a weird, shady drug deal. So things are looking up. Publix actually had paper towels and toilet paper. I was actually to buy just regular. Here's a cool thing they're doing at our local Publix. I'm sure they're doing it at all of them. The grocery aisles, every other one is one way the opposite direction. So now you serpentine through so that everybody basically, you don't have any face-to-face contact. So if 2 people are coming down the aisle, now since it's one way, everybody's lined up behind each other. Hypothetically, if you maintain your 6 feet of distance, you're breathing in the back of other people's heads. So there's no face-to-face contact. So you basically serpentine through the store, which I thought was a great original idea.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I actually went to the grocery store yesterday and I noticed those arrows on the floor, but I didn't even take time to read what they said. I was just kind of meandering through, probably not doing my diligence. But I did notice that there were arrows on the floors at the grocery store.
So, Neil, you moved to Colorado. What year did you move to Colorado?
So I moved to Colorado September of 2008.
Now, you and I had the luxury, the benefit, I would say, of learning how to snowboard in Ohio. And as they often said back then, if you can ski or snowboard in Ohio, you can do it anywhere, because essentially we learned and grew up ice skating, essentially. I mean, all our snow was man-made, and by the end of the night, it was frozen on ice. And I learned that was true in a 1997 trip to Big Sky, Montana, where I was riding like double black diamond because it was all powder. It was like riding on pillows for us. And so when you're used to falling on ice, the idea of falling in waist high powder, I was riding stuff that like some of the people who grew up there wouldn't even ride. Have you found the same thing from learning to ride in such crappy conditions? It's definitely helped you in your adult life.
You know, absolutely I have. Although I did find out that to ride deep powder, you definitely have to change your way of riding. But absolutely, you know, we come from Ohio riding boilerplate, and you get out here to the west and you're running on some nipple deep powder, and it's a different deal, but it's amazing, you know.
You got to
change my life.
You got to set your bindings up to ride in the back seat, as they like to say.
I do it. Absolutely.
So you have a very interesting life. You do 2 things that I know of. I guess, is one of them a passion that you're trying to turn into a career, or are they both career oriented? I guess first and foremost, let's quit being a little so shady about it. What are the 2 things that you primarily do for a living?
Okay, so my main source of money is I bartend. I bartend at 4 different live music venues in Denver. A lot of concert stuff, and then I also do part-time work for a ranch that I actually live at. It's a nonprofit for wild mustangs.
So you live on a wild mustang ranch. How many acres is that?
We're on 1,000 acres.
And I would imagine it's when you live on a 1,000-acre ranch, it's not hard to do social distancing at all.
No, you know, honestly, the older I've gotten, the more introvert I've become, and For me, it's business as usual being quarantined. I like my space and I like kind of being away. As a bartender, I get my fill of interacting with folks and all that. But honestly, I'm more comfortable out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I know when you do a lot of your bartending and there's big name groups coming through, you post a lot of photos on Instagram. What's one of the live acts that you were most impressed with or you were most excited to bartend at to be able to hear the music? And obviously, I worked in radio for 6.5 years. And what people don't realize is when you're working during a live show, you're working. You hear the music, but at a certain point, it just kind of like becomes radio music where you really don't get to focus on it. And so you don't really get to enjoy the show. Like we used to say in radio, the best seat in the house is in front of the stage. Everybody thinks the best place to be is on stage or backstage, but you don't see anything back there. You don't see the show. The music isn't set up properly. Yep. The best place is to be out in the crowd because that's where all the speakers are hanging and aiming towards. But who was one of the favorite persons you got to see or listen to remotely when bartending?
I get that question a lot. Bartending, customers always asking me, who was my favorite, this and that. And for a long time, I didn't have one. I've seen so many good bands and so many acts. I probably see on average 250 bands a year. So, I see a lot, and I've seen most everybody, but it wasn't until I saw Prince. I saw Prince live at one of the venues I work at, the Ogden Theater in Denver, Colorado, and that was kind of mind-blowing for me. That performance and just, that musician, that magnitude, that was kind of it for me.
One of the persons the person I got excited for you when you posted, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure you bartended during a Coulter Wall show.
Oh yeah, love that kid.
And that's
you want to talk about a throwback storyteller,
And you said it, that kid. When I first heard him, when I started running to Dropkick Murphys, and because they have mandolins and banjos in their band, Pandora would include other bands, and so that's how I discovered Dead South and Turnpike Troubadours. And so then I would look up Dead South and listen to their Pandora station and Turnpike Troubadours, and anyhow, that led me down this black hole to what I call New Age country or even New Age bluegrass, and I discovered Coulter Wall. And when I heard that kid, I thought he was like a 50-year-old dude. His voice is so deep, so rhythmic. He has like this, he sounds like, you'd expect to see like this 50-year-old guy with a big old bottle. I'm sure he has the bottle of whiskey and the cigarettes, but then you look on YouTube and he's like 22, 23. And his...
Yes, sir. I've been fortunate enough to see him a number of times and at, smaller intimate venues. The one club I work at is the Bluebird Theater, and it's, 550, 650 capacity. So, I've been lucky enough to see Coulter in there. Sturgill Simpson was through there as well, coming up. And those guys are just amazing, But Coulter, that's a once-in-a-lifetime artist. His voice, just an amazing artist. Storyteller, Canadian, too.
Yeah, a lot of those cats are like the Dead South. You would hear the name Dead South, you would think, okay, Tennessee. No, they're like from Saskatchewan, Canada or something. A lot of those cats are up from the Great White North. Now, you and I, we obviously went to the same high school together, but one of the things that you and I shared early on is we both got heavily involved in photography class. And that kind of leads us to where we're going here. And you took it a lot more serious than I did, clearly, because one of the things you've taken advantage of living on that Mustang Ranch and your love for photography. How long have you been doing the wildlife photography, and how did that just come naturally from snowboarding and being out on that ranch, or was it something you're doing prior to the ranch?
Well, it all came, I grew up hunting and fishing. I grew up, spending a lot of time out in the woods, and nature and the outdoors has always been huge for me. So it was kind of one of those deals where and art has always been a big thing for me. Music, just everything art I love. And I always enjoy taking photographs and stuff. And about 7 years ago, I just kind of decided to go in and get a DSLR. And, I was doing a lot of hikes at the time and running into wildlife and that. And I thought it'd be really neat to start documenting it. And so I went out and bought a DSLR and really just started taking it out on my hikes and documenting, all the animals that I'd see and that, and started sharing it on my Instagram. And it kind of started to blow up into something that I had no idea would happen,
Cool thing. I know she had like 11,000 followers on Instagram. And so you're saying that basically started from just posting your wildlife photos?
Yeah. So, I started Instagram. I don't know how many folks use it for, I guess, anymore. I guess a lot of people use it for businesses and that sort of thing. But, like all social media for me, I just started it to, connect with friends and,
Sure.
and that sort of thing. And actually it was my younger sister who turned me on to Instagram, because she's like, you like shooting photos and that, you should start that platform up. It's just photos only. So that's kind of what I did. And I just, was just basically posting photos from hikes and that sort of thing. And, I never claimed to be a photographer, just kind of worked into that.
Well, you were talking about your DSLR. What's your weapon of choice? What are you shooting right now?
So right now I'm shooting two different bodies. I'm shooting a Nikon D810, and then I just picked up a Sony A7 III that I'm starting to work into the Sony deal, because I'm wanting to do a little more video work and also lighten up in gear.
Sure.
And, they are really catering more towards that. So.
Has any of the bar owners tried to get you to put the bottles down and maybe do in-house photography from them? But you'd make so much more money doing the bar work.
Yeah, no, they haven't. I've done some concert photography and stuff like that, but they don't really have a need for like an in-house photographer, I guess. So not much opportunity as far as that goes yet, but, I consider myself a photographer. I kind of pigeonholed myself into a wildlife photographer, not trying to do it. It just kind of happened. But really, I shoot a lot of photos and I shoot a lot of different things. And I really just enjoy getting out and trying to be creative.
Now, obviously, one of the things that go back to, especially people our generation, when we grew up watching Wild America and all those different shows, we'd always wonder how the footage was captured, how the photos got, the videos were taken. Then every once in a while, there'd be like a behind the scenes video that would come out and you'd see the people sitting in duck blinds or weird locations for hours on end just to get that one shot. Do you kind of plan a day trip when you plan on going out, or do you just go hiking and what you find and what you see is what you shoot?
It kind of goes both ways. Sometimes I plan things out, and like right now, I've been going out for wild turkey the last 4 days. So I've been spending hours chasing turkeys off the ranch, actually, which has been kind of nice. But a lot of the photos that I get, I go into Rocky Mountain National Park, Yellowstone, Grand Tetons, a couple other places. The big thing is to get in front of these animals with a camera and tripod and stuff, you kind of got to go to places where they're kind of used to people.
Yeah.
It's definitely a nice luxury living where I do and having so many national parks, within a 10-hour kind of circuit.
I'm just going through Instagram as you're talking and looking at these photos, and they're just like the one of the mountain goat up with the purple and blue background. It's just, this is National Geographic grade stuff. I know some of your photos have been published. Where are some of the areas you've had stuff published from?
So far, mostly it's just local stuff. Colorado Outdoors magazine. I got my first cover in last month's issue, which was really exciting. Super neat to see. I've had an inside spread with them as well, and a back cover. A couple of miscellaneous photos here and there. They have a photography issue that I've been in a couple of times. And then also I've been published with Colorado Wildlife, or what is it, the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I have the cover of the bighorn sheep and goat hunting brochure right now. And then I had the cover of the big game hunting brochure a couple years back.
Nice.
With the same outfit. And the only other paying deal that I've had was I did an ad with Hornady Ammunition.
Nice.
I sold them a photo of a bull elk, and they used it with a new 6.5 PRC cartridge that came out, which was really exciting.
You know, it's kind of ironic you mentioned that. Well, not really ironic. When I was looking through these photos and you're talking, you know, I was thinking about earlier in this conversation, you're talking about growing up as an outdoorsman and fishing and hunting. And I would imagine when it comes to getting some of these photos, you have to rely on some of your hunting skills. Granted, you're using a different weapon to shoot with, but more importantly, the art of not being seen, smelled, or heard. Now, you said you obviously go to areas where the animals are more used to human interaction than their regular counterparts. But with that being said, even an animal that's used to human interaction, they don't like to be, you know, approached too closely. And so I'm sure you've had to do a little sneaking and creeping up. And I was just thinking, I'm sure there's a lot of animal lovers and anti-hunters who enjoy your photos, but they probably don't realize that some of your hunting skills come into play to get these photos to begin with.
No, it's very true. And to be honest with you, I think I have an edge over a lot of folks that don't have that background. You know, I run into people like you're talking about, animal lovers, you know, those folks all the time. And we definitely approach wildlife in a different sense. And, you know, some of my good buddies and photographers that I look up to, we all come from a hunting background. And, you know, it's been a lifetime for me of studying, you know, animal movements and reading body languages and, you know, just a lot of things that really help me put myself in the right place to capture the photos that I have.
You know, I've never personally gone hunting, which is weird because I grew up in Kentucky and Ohio and I own firearms. It's just not something that I've gotten around to do. My whole opinion on the thing kind of changed when everybody do yourself a favor and go out and Google Joe Rogan explains deer hunting. And he was basically explaining that most people don't realize that the natural existence of a deer, for example, is very tough and, you know, rugged. Most deers die of disease, dysentery, or malnutrition before they even get to a upper level of adulthood, if they're lucky enough not to be torn apart while being alive by predators. And the picture that he paints of the livelihood of a wild deer, he basically, you know, he goes into great detail about it and explains how, you know, a clean shot is definitely the most humane way for a deer to pass, opposed to dying of starvation or illness or being torn apart by wild predators. Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, hunters do so much for conservation. You know, I hate when I hear ill things about hunting. You know, I get it. You know, I'm all for everybody's, you know, do what they enjoy and do what makes you feel right or good. But for me, I've always hunted and fished, and, you know, I hunt for meat. I'm not a trophy hunter. I do my trophy hunting with my camera. Sure.
So,
well, I mean, and not to, and you kind of touched on a little bit, but say 5% of most wildlife conservation money comes from hunting and fishing license. And so if we didn't have those sports and those licenses, that money would dry up and there'd be very little to no conservation going on.
Absolutely.
So has anybody dropped a hint or suggested that, hey, why don't you start a YouTube channel? While you're out there back, you know, hiking around, strap a GoPro to your head, you know, bring an extra camera and a tripod, just get some footage and get your YouTube channel up and running.
Yeah, you know, nobody's pitched that to me. You know, I've thought about it myself. You know, the big thing that I run into is, you know, I'm an artist, and it's hard for me to even sit at my computer and edit my photos.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I like being out in the field and chasing these things down. So a big portion, or, a big thing for me is just thinking about the hours of sitting, cutting videos and editing things down. Like, I'm very ADD. So sitting down for those sorts of things is kind of tough, and a lot of people contact me or I have a lot of people close that are like, you really should be marketing yourself more and selling your photography and this and that. And,
absolutely.
I just can't sit and do that. It's hard for me to even think of myself as a photographer, I guess. I'm getting better at it. The more I look at my photos and the more that people contact me and stuff, the more I realize that I have put together a decent gallery of content. So
11,000 followers on Instagram's nothing to sneeze at either.
Yeah, no, and I'm pretty proud of that, considering it, just happened organically, it's really neat. I've met so many fantastic people, and it's really been cool.
What's is there a particular country or location, wildlife wise, or a particular animal that's on your bucket list that you want to get some footage of?
I'd really like to go to Alaska and photograph muskox. There's a lot of animals in Alaska that would be nice. Polar bear, caribou, a lot of North American big game is kind of what I'm into.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking of all the places that you've been and that you've shot, and something keeps popping in my mind. It's from earlier in this conversation, saying the older you get, the more you like the idea of being out away from society. And one of the things I've been finding myself a lot lately is, I don't know why, I am enamored with homestead rescue, and I've been watching Alaska: The Last Frontier for like 10 years, and I'm getting to that point, man. If I had the ability, the financial ability, just to, even here in Florida, just to go somewhere and buy 5 to 10 acres of land and get out of the suburbs, I would do it in a heartbeat. I would love to get a plot of land and, even go to Tennessee at some point and just get the hell out of the city and just enjoy some nice and quiet for once.
Yeah, man. It's good for the soul. It is for me. Like I said, I grew up outside of Grove City, kind of more, I had nothing but fields and hardwoods all around me. So I kind of grew up out there doing that. And then, I didn't spend much time in the city until I moved to Denver, and it was fun for a time, but I always just kind of missed the outdoor, I didn't miss the outdoors because I was still spending a lot of time outdoors, but I just missed living away from the city. It's nice to go in the city, but for me, I like to be away, have my dog and horses and that, and yeah.
What's one of your key roles when you're working out at the Mustang Ranch?
So mostly out here, I'm just doing mucking, fixing stuff that's broken,
sure,
that sort of stuff. A lot of the more hands-on horse training is done by our head trainer, Stephanie. And then my girlfriend, Petra, she is the events coordinator out here, and she does a lot of stuff. We do events with veterans and some different Mike's Camera has a photo workshop out here. We have different retreats with some of the local schools, just kind of educating people on the wild horses and that sort of deal. But for me, I mostly am just kind of a laborer.
Yeah, when I first moved to Florida, I was dating a girl for a while. She taught equestrian horseback riding, and one of the part-time jobs I picked up was kind of mucking out stalls, and which is funny because growing up in Kentucky, my extended family always had horses, but we never did. But I just had this natural instinct to work with horses, and I'd be taking them out to the pasture and mucking out stalls, and these people are like, well, how long have you been working with horses? I'm like, a week. I just have this weird connection with them, and I never really had a problem. I think my foot got stepped on one time, but other than that, I never really had a issue. It's funny though. People ask if I ever ridden horses. I'm like, yeah, but I can only ride English because I never rode Western saddles. And because I was working at an equestrian farm, the only saddles they had were English saddles. And so when I did ride, I was trying to learn how to post and ride English.
That is too funny.
Yeah.
And now I'm just picturing, so our head trainer, her husband, he's tall like you. So anytime I see him on a horse, it's just kind of funny looking. And now I'm picturing you posting on the English saddle all tall.
All 6'5"
That's
of me.
fun. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, horses, they're amazing creatures. I've always loved them, but it wasn't until moving out here and really being around them every day that I realized just how amazing they really are.
What's the longest trek or longest shoot you've gone on? What's the most hours, days even, did you spend out in the backcountry to get the shot that you're looking for? And do you remember what animal it was?
I've spent probably, I don't know, 10 to 14 days chasing elk. Elk's my favorite. I don't know if you can tell, but chasing big bull elk is kind of what I really like to do. So the last 2 Septembers, I've spent anywhere between 10 and 14 days out there.
One of the things I talk about on my World War II based podcast, What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, is obviously when I'm out doing a 2 or 3 day event, especially if it's out of state or whatever, I have the luxury and the benefit of camping out in an 80-year-old World War II pup tent on the hard ground. And obviously, as you get older, the harder that is. Now my body's only good for about 8 hours before I'm tossing and turning. But I try to explain to people who haven't slept on a ground in a long time what it does to your body. I mean, yes, it sucks laying on hard ground, but I'll tell you what, waking up the next day, just being outdoors, outside in the sun, out in the weather for 2 or 3 days without literally walking inside of a solid structure with electricity or air, it just does something to your soul, your spirit. And that's one of my favorite things about the World War II reenacting, is obviously sharing history with people, but actually, one, it's the only time that people expect me not to answer my cell phone because they didn't exist in 1942. And so with the exception of taking photos, I don't have my phone on me. We, at the end of the day, we're all sitting around by our tents, sitting around a campfire. We're actually talking and social interacting and pretending like it's 1993 all over again. And I try to get people who haven't done it in a long time, go camping. There's just something about sleeping outside, even if it's on a hard ground, you're tossing and turning all night. There's just something about returning to nature that's just good for you.
No, it absolutely is. Yeah, I mean, I recommend it for anybody. And actually, recently I'd watched a documentary on earthing, and it's basically grounding yourself to the earth and how good it is for you. And I recommend anybody who listens to this to have a look at it. But yeah, man, the woods and nature, and it's good for everybody, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. I know there's psychiatrists like in New York City and Chicago and London, all that, who tell their patients, hey, go out to the park, take your shoes off, and just walk around in the grass for 20 minutes. It actually has, healing properties to it. And people kind of think it's goofy, but, we as a species have lived outdoors a hell of a lot longer than we've lived in the environments at which we are in now when you look at the great timeline of our lives and our species. And so it only makes sense that, we return a little bit to nature.
No, it's very true. It's very true. I agree.
If, someone was coming up to you and they said, hey, Neil, I really love your photos and this is something that I've been wanting to get into, where would I even start? I'm sure you've been asked that question before. And I know it's kind of questions like that. The quick and easy answer, which people don't like, is just do it. Not to quote Nike and their marketing campaign from the 90s, which, by the way, I was never a fan of that campaign until I actually started doing things like radio and podcasts and running my own business. People are like, well, how do you do? You just do it. But other than telling people just to do it, what kind of advice would you give to somebody about trying to get into the photography world, whether it's wildlife or contemporary or even landscaping around a city?
When people contact me, a lot of people want to know about equipment and about the equipment I use and stuff like that. And I always tell people to basically try and get the best that they can afford.
Mm-hmm.
But when it all comes down to it for photography, it's light and composition. So a lot of times I'll tell people, study light, focus on the way the light shines on things and really pay attention to that, because that's going to be, that's photography in a nutshell to me. And then composition, look for leading lines and just look for things that are pleasant to the eye. And, I guess you can be trained to look for composition and stuff, but I think it's you kind of have to have that too in you.
Do you think you got an advantage?
I don't know. Really what it comes down to is have fun. I think that is for everything. I think the fact that I love what I do and I love these animals, it shines through your work. So if you don't enjoy it, I think that shows up in your pictures. You just you got to love it. You got to enjoy it and study light.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you think you have an advantage over some of your younger counterparts when it comes to growing up when we did and Mr. Hardgrove's photography class, where we were shooting on 35 millimeter film. We were learning, apertures, using our light meters. And because back then when you're dropping $7 to $8 on a roll of film, every frame literally had to count. And so you actually had to set up your shot more because it literally cost you money. And, unlike now where it's just shoot, and go home and delete 500 photos, back then, when you're buying film, and especially if you're developing it yourself, and thank God we didn't have to spend, with the exception of what they charged us at the beginning of the class, we weren't buying developer stop, bath, and fix out of pocket. But for photographers back then who were, we were in the transitional period. I think it probably gave you a little bit of a leg up to have that fundamental education in the old school way.
Yeah, I definitely approach digital photography like film. For one, like I said, I do not like to sit at the computer. I don't like going through all those images. And, these cameras today, they'll shoot 10 frames a second, 20 frames a second. And I'm out in the field quite a bit with other photographers, and I hear that shutter just going off, and all I can think about is, oh my gosh, I do not want to be the person sitting at the computer going through all those. So I definitely try and be, and I certainly have missed photographs that if I were hammering down on the shutter, I probably would have got. But, I'm more kind of lean towards that old school, and I'm looking for a specific moment. I'm used to watching these animals move and that sort of thing, and I'm looking for particular movements and looking for my shot, because I'm not trying to go through, sure, I can fill up 128 gigs of photos real quick, but at the end of the day, I don't want to go through that.
Well, not to mention, the more you're shooting, the higher rate you're shooting, the more battery power you're going through, and the more batteries and more equipment you got to carry, which is a heavier backpack, and just everything counts out in the field.
It certainly does. It all counts for sure. Yeah. So I definitely approach it more with a film style to it. I'm real selective. I'm watching how everything's unfolding and really just trying to put myself in the right place. And, honestly, that came from from doing it. When I first got out there and I'd get in front of animals, I'd just start shooting a photo right where I was standing and shooting a bunch of photos, and I wasn't ever even really thinking about it. And it wasn't until, I don't know, maybe a year into it where I really started, looking back at my photos, and I'm like, I got a bunch of garbage photos here. And then I really started kind of studying other photographers and kind of really getting serious about it. And it is what it is now. I got a bunch of people following me for that.
Well, going back to our pre-mentioned schooling, one of the rules they tried to instill in us early on is there's a difference between a snapshot and a photo. And it sounds to me when you first got started, you have a lot of snapshots of animals and very few photos.
That's exactly it. You're exactly right.
It was so crazy last Christmas.
And that's kind of the thing. that's kind of the thing is, I'll be at a location and we'll have some animals in front of us, and there'll be some other photographers, and it's that kind of deal where people start popping off photographs, and I'm starting to look at the landscape and trying to really put together a photograph and thinking about what this animal might do. Honestly, you really got to get ahead of what's going to happen. I feel like that's the real key in the wildlife game to getting some of these shots. Is you got to take the gamble and get ahead.
Well, and I think the other advantage, we kind of talked about using your hunting skills, but just as important, your outdoor skills when it comes to knowing wild foliage and saying, okay, this animal likes this particular foliage. Hey, I see this elk, it's heading towards this tree. I know that if I stay put, he's probably going to go over to that particular bush that they're known for eating, or going to this, because you know that animal's behavior. Instead of just trying to get that snapshot before they run away, okay, chances are he's heading in that direction. He's going to be safe about it and look out, but he's probably going to go to that area, eat that foliage. And luckily by then, the sun's going to be down an extra 3 feet. The lighting's going to be better. That cloud's going to move to the left more, and you can literally predict your shot a little bit better.
That's it. You hit it right on the head. I mean, those are the things that are going through my mind when I have an animal in front of me. I'm looking at all that. Well, first and foremost, I look at the light. And then I kind of survey the terrain, and depending on what kind of animal or how many animals I'm dealing with, then what do I think they're going to do? What's their next move? Sure, I could start taking photos right there, but I'm really trying to document these animals in their best situations. So yeah, a lot of time I look at light first, then terrain, and then I make my moves and just try and set myself up to really make a nice photograph.
Is there any particular world of photography that you've really wanted to get into, but whether due to time or just haven't gotten to the area? I know you said you do more than just wildlife stuff. Is there any particular type of photography that you've been wanting to get into, but just haven't had the motivation or the opportunity to?
I've always been interested in like street photography and actually kind of like somewhat like lifestyle stuff.
Sure.
I wouldn't mind doing some hunting and fishing lifestyle stuff, but I've always enjoyed street photography, like from a candid perspective, and I like a lot of like black and white street style.
I just had a thought that was, and I could be wrong on this, but I feel that sort of photography was probably easier and harder back in the day. Harder, obviously, because the technology behind photography has come such a long way, and it's more readily available. But the other problem with the fact that everybody has a camera on them, literally on their phones, everybody's conditioned to pose now, and so it's so much harder to get a natural photo. Like when I'm at a World War II event and I'm just trying to get a quick snapshot of some guys talking in front of a tent, or giving a weapons demo, if anybody in that particular area sees your camera in the peripheral, they just stop and give you these cheap looking at the camera. It's like, no, I'm trying to get the natural you in your natural environment, where it's probably easier to shoot animals nowadays because every damn human out there, they're ready to set up for I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeVille. And it's just it's probably a little bit easier 30 years ago when people were still a little more camera shy.
No, absolutely. I agree. And I like to push myself and go out in the city and walk around the streets with my cameras and try and get those candid shots. But I definitely am not comfortable doing it. One, I don't like, feeling like I'm stealing people's photos, or, I don't know. It's a weird thing. But I'm so comfortable in the woods and with animals and that sort of thing. It's like, it's second nature at this point for me. But, I like being creative, so I try and push myself and go shoot different things. But when I'm in the city and I'm looking for those candid shots and looking at architecture and stuff, it's definitely a different deal. It's neat,
It's so funny looking back on the human timeline, primarily in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, before everybody had a camera. Well, one, before everybody had a camera, because cameras used to be expensive. But you can go back and even go on YouTube and you can look at old videos from like the 70s and 80s. Like the instinct everybody had when the camera was on them was to flick it off. It just seemed like the thing everybody used to do. Like, no one wanted their pictures taken. No one wanted to be on video. There's probably hours and hours. If you were able to go through time travel, collect everybody's film and everybody's photos, there's probably weeks worth of just nonstop footage and still frame photos of people flicking off cameras, because people, they weren't as open to photography and videography as we are now. We're just conditioned to it because we're around cameras 24/7.
I can't even tell you how many cameras I've flicked off in my time. Literally, to this day,
ATM cameras, red light cameras.
It's just terrible. Oh, that's too funny. Yeah, what a world.
Well, and the other thing is, too, I think about, because, obviously I did 8 semesters of photography class and spent a lot of time shooting skateboard photos and videos. And I have a 22-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old daughter, and I'm thinking, especially the 12-year-old, when they get to be our age, they're not going to have any photos. Photo albums are gone. And every time a phone gets replaced, every time a hard drive crashes, every time something gets encrypted by ransomware, that's just lost memories. Whereas I can just come into my studio, walk over 3 feet, and I can pull photos of me in high school right now. And that's kind of the sad thing, is because analog photos have gone by the wayside. And I was going to say earlier, it was so crazy last Christmas amongst the younger cats, even the 20-year-olds. Ironically, it wasn't Polaroid, but Fujifilm. They put out a Polaroid camera, an Instamatic camera. And I know like 6, my daughter got one last year, her cousin got one. And even, it's funny because her cousin's mom's like 28. And so, she's wasn't around during the original Polaroids. And for just a span of, 2 weeks to a month, because they lose interest so quickly, it was cool to see how excited people were to actually hold a photo in their hand and to shoot a photo and watch it develop right in front of them. I was like, it's kind of refreshing just to travel back in time for those few weeks to see how excited people were to literally get their hands on some photos instead of swiping through somebody's phone.
No, absolutely. And it's my favorite thing to do. I mean, when I print my photos off and actually get to hold them and see them, because so much of it lives, on my Instagram. So there's a lot of my photos that have never, ever been printed, which is sad. And I've lost thousands of images from hard drives crashing, from my own stupidity of deleting things, because I'm not a computer guy at all. So,
well, if you haven't done so already,
it is very sad.
If you haven't done so already, at least get one in the external hard drive format, and that is a solid state drive. They're basically like big ass flash drives. There's no moving parts. And so unless you spill water on that or the thing shorts out, you won't ever have to worry about failure on it. And then that'll definitely preserve your photos.
And I've just been talking with somebody about that recently, because I have another hard drive that's kind of on the fritz. And I was talking to another photographer friend of mine, and he's like, you just have to go solid state.
Yeah, and the good news is the price is coming down on those.
Yep.
Yeah, the price is coming.
I'm shooting my camera now. It's 36 megapixels, and it adds up real quick. So when you're looking at a terabyte for $200 or whatever, compared to 4 terabytes for $90 or whatever, you can get a whatever the other hard drive is. Yeah, I need to invest in some solid state stuff for sure.
Real quick, before we let you go, camera technology, has it kind of plateaued out where it's not so painful? Because, especially time travels fast for us, but, going back to thinking of the quality of a digital camera in 2005 versus today, or even going back to 2010 when the, DSLRs came out, you have these hardcore photographers, they'd buy a camera that was, 16 megapixels, and then 12 months later, a 20 megapixel came out. Has it at least plateaued out enough right now that you're not like, shit, man, I just bought this camera and now there's one that's twice the megapixels that just came out?
Unfortunately, no. It's still going. I've been shooting this body now for 4 years, but I'm starting to actually move into the mirrorless side of things. Sony just released, well, I guess it was last year. I think it's 64 megapixel. We're getting into almost medium format, digital cameras.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. And people definitely get wrapped up in gear, and people contact me all the time about gear. And nice cameras and nice gear will definitely help out, but you can take, if you can just look back in history at photographs and see, what some of these amazing photographs were taken on, and it wasn't a 64 megapixel, 20 frames a second, camera.
Well, I think that can be said for about any sport. If you don't know the fundamentals and you're not practicing it or studying it, whether it's a sport or a hobby, the equipment can only get you so far. And if you don't have the fundamentals, the passion and the education and whatever it is you're trying to do, some may say that, somebody with passion, skill, and education can achieve more than somebody without that with the best equipment easily.
Absolutely. And I run into it myself. I'm out there, my setup, it's not cheap, but I'm definitely running a more economical setup than most of the guys that are doing what I'm doing. So yeah, it definitely comes down to the fundamentals. I agree completely.
And sadly, since you like you said, you don't really have the artist in you, doesn't allow your mind to meander down the long trails that are required for making a solid living off of your photography. But the good news about that is since you're not doing it, you don't know how many of your photos are being stolen and sold out from underneath you. I've talked to some people here locally, and that may sound bad. For example, I do computer work for a framing gallery and an art gallery, and the husband and wife, they're artists. They frame pictures to pay for the overhead, but they paint and they do their own stuff. And then on my World War II podcast, I had a interview with a local underwater diver who went down to Peleliu and down at Tarawa area, was doing underwater diving, and even she locally was walking through a local art fair, and there's a booth and there's this underwater photo of a turtle, and she's like, that looks familiar. Went home, found the original photo, went back the next day and found out someone lifted her photo off of the internet, printed it out, framed it up, and was selling it as original art. And it just,
oh my Lord. Yeah, it's definitely happening out there. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody hasn't done some of that with some of my stuff. At this point, I don't even have watermarks or anything on my stuff. I just, I don't know, maybe one day, we'll see. It's, for me, I've sold stuff, people contact me, but as far as like pushing myself or, trying to push my art onto other people, I don't know. It's tough for me.
Hey, I can get that. It's not everybody's bag. And some might even say that if you seriously start going down that route, or perhaps people in the past who have, that it takes away the heart and the passion from the project. And now it's more, hurry up and let's get some new photos done because I need another paycheck.
Right. Yeah. I'm more thinking I need to find somebody who's willing to invest in me, and my work, and, get a percentage, kind of work it as, find somebody who's, that's what they're good at, and let me be good at taking photographs,
Or even still, you can even look around and try to find, maybe some of these photo equipment companies who are come out with some new stuff or recently launched, who may not have the notoriety, some of the bigger ones, and say, hey, why don't you send me some of your equipment on loaner? I'll try it out and we'll see what we come up with. And then, you're getting some equipment you can use for a couple of weeks before you send it back, and they're getting someone who's testing out their stuff and seeing what the field life is and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the longer I go down this road, the more I am, you know, feeling like I could make something of it. You know, whether I could do it full time or not, that remains to be seen. But yeah, like, you know, I am going to try and do more video this year. I think that's going to be a neat little deal. Really, I want to do some video and then kind of share clips of what I'm seeing, and then still have my snapshots or, you know, photographs to share with it, to kind of give some people a little more movement, you know, and kind of see what's actually going on, and then still have that static, you know, moment.
Well, not only that, but I think, you know, particularly your fans and people who would follow you on YouTube, they would earn a, you know, simple concept. You start at the video, here's this photo. What did it take to get this photo? And then you go into the time-lapse footage of the film where you trudging through creeks up to your waist in water and climbing over hills and, you know, sleeping out in the field overnight, and just showing them what someone in your line of passion and hobby goes through to get that shot that, you know, oh, that's a great photo. Well, yes, it's a great photo. Here's what it took to get it. And I really think, and honestly, I mean, there's a YouTube channel called Adventure with Purpose. The guy's an underwater diver, and I never realized how many cars have been sunken or abandoned for insurance fraud at boat docks and by bridges. He's going around like Colorado and like Washington State, and for like every boat dock on a river he goes to, he pulls out like 6 or 7 cars that's been underwater for like 30 years. And I'm not a scuba diver. I have no interest in it, but I find it interesting. Here's a guy, he's traveling all around the Northwest, getting called into these cities. His YouTube channel got to the point where a local sheriff's office who didn't have the dive logistics that he does, they called him out, said, hey, you know, our weather's going to turn within 3 weeks. We have a report that, you know, this missing person may be in his truck, and we think maybe in this part of the river. I'll be damned if he didn't call this guy out. They went down there and they found the truck, and sadly the guy was inside of it. And, you know, that's one of the things they have to do is every single car he pulls out, they have a protocol. One, before he pulled out, they got to check to see if there's a body in there. And usually 98% of the cars that are underwater, the windows are rolled down because it's insurance fraud. People want them to sink fast so they can get the hell out of there. And so most of them, the windows are rolled down. The ones that kind of scare them at first is if the windows are rolled up. And then when they pull them up onto the boat ramp, they got to pop the trunk and make sure there's nothing in the back. He's found guns and safes and all kinds of stuff. But once again, even if you're not a scuba diver, just the fact of watching a 10-minute video of the efforts this guy goes through to get pollutants out of the river, his channel is blowing up. And so even someone who may not have interest in the root project, just seeing how the hot dog's made, it's just interesting as hell. And I really think you would stand to gain some viewers, and, you know, and expand your art doing that too.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try and do some more video stuff and try and get some behind the scenes type stuff, and, you know, kind of share, you know, at least start with my followers on Instagram, you know, with my story and stuff, kind of give some people a little more personality. I don't think a lot of people really know anything about me, or, you know, I don't really put anything personal up. I basically just share my photography. So, you know, I think people like having that connection with people that they follow. So I'm going to try and make an effort to do a little more of that, you know. Well,
Neil Doppes, Colorado, Deer Trail, Colorado. Deer Trail just sounds like a beautiful place. What's the population? Well, you probably don't know unless you drive by the sign every day. What's vaguely the population of Deer Trail, Colorado?
I wouldn't even be able to guess. It's got to be really small. I mean, there's nothing out here. It's just a bunch of big horse and cattle ranches.
Can't think of a better place to be during a global pandemic than out in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, sir. I've been enjoying it, riding my horse every day, chasing wild turkeys. Yeah, man, it's been good.
What kind of, do you own a horse, or you just ride the ones that they have there on the ranch?
I do. I have a 5-year-old Mustang from Nevada that I've been working with the last year and a half or so.
Nice. How many hands is it?
Yeah. She's 16 hands. She's a giant Mustang.
That's a big girl.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, man, I'm envious and I'm thrilled to actually get a chance to talk to you in person for the first time in probably 26 years. You know, it's so crazy.
Easily.
It's so crazy before this whole worldwide pandemic thing started. Two people that we went to high school with who just happened to, well, both of them were in the military. They both happened just to retire down here. Brian Gilman lives like 35 minutes from me. And then, no, 45 minutes from me. And Eric Hill, who I think was in your class, lives like 35 minutes from me. And we were actually talking about getting together and going canoeing on the Peace River. And we were supposed to do it like the Saturday. All this nonsense broke and when everything started getting canceled. So I was going to actually see some people from high school that I haven't seen in 20 years who just happened to move down to where I live. And then the whole world went to shit. And so here we are.
Right. Well, that's amazing, man. You know, it can be a small world, right?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely crazy. Did you know Ed Monette?
I did. Yeah, that was definitely news that I wasn't expecting. That's for sure.
Well, the crazy thing is, before that all happened, he used to live in Jacksonville, and you know, him and my brother were really good friends. And he used to come to my house in high school and play my dad's guitar and teach me how to play guitar. And he lived in Jacksonville and did some time in Tampa. Well, like the summer before his passing, he actually came down to my town on vacation, which was Fort Myers, Florida, and I didn't know until the week he left. And I don't know where he stayed, but his rental car got stolen from his hotel that he stayed at over in Fort Myers. Like, I don't know what part of town he stayed in, but it's like I've never met anybody's had their car stolen while on vacation. And I was bummed that he was here in my town. I didn't get a chance to hang out with him because I didn't even see his post until he got back home to Columbus. But it's another example of small world. And there's actually been another person I graduated with, her family has property down here, and I've yet to run into her, and she's been down here a few times. I've actually gotten a lot of messages from some Grove City alumni who come down here on vacation. Of course, they don't send me any messages until after they're gone. Maybe that's a hint of their opinions of me, but it remains to be seen.
That's too funny.
Well, Neil, thank you so much for your time, great. And keep it up, and hope the bartending. Now with now you bartend in Denver, and I'm sure all the bars are closed down there because of this, right?
Yeah, my last day of work was the 12th of March. So, and they've pretty much pushed all concerts back at least to the beginning of June at this point. So I'm not really feeling that, but it is what it is. You know, I'm always making the best of all situations, so
that's pretty much.
I'll figure things out.
That's pretty much where we're all at. Because my IT firm and all that, I just spent the last 2 days applying for the Paycheck Protection Plan. We'll see if that comes through or not. But my fiance is a school teacher, and she's been teaching classes out of the podcast studio. My 12-year-old daughter's been doing the distance learning stuff, and that's just crazy. And as somebody who hosts a history podcast, it's like, I'm just looking at this in the long view. It's like, you realize when we're like 60 and 70 and the anniversary rolls around of this nonsense, there's going to be somebody out there looking for someone to talk to. Remember when the COVID-19 pandemic? Oh yes, I was 41 years old, and we're literally living through history right now. And the crazy thing is my daughter was doing a history fair about 3 months ago, and 3 or 4 of the kids around there were doing a big report on the Spanish flu of 1904 or 1901, whatever it was. And so 100 years from now, some kid's going to be doing a history report on COVID-19 and how it affected the world in such crazy ways. It's just, of all the things we've lived through, Gulf War, 9/11, and all that stuff, this was never on my radar of even being remotely possible outside of a science fiction movie. It's just crazy.
Yeah, man. It's definitely been wild. It ramped up real quick. We're definitely living it.
Well, friends, stay safe. Go out there and get some more photography, and tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, you can find me on my Instagram at Doppes, Doppes. On Instagram. That's pretty much it.
And as
I appreciate you having me on.
Not a problem.
Sorry it took so damn long.
Hey, not a problem. I'm going to have to get your dad on my World War II podcast and talk about his arsenal and his Jeeps and all that stuff. But that's another story for another time.
Oh.
But as always, anytime we have a guest on, and head over to failedtofail.com, especially if you're listening to this via Apple Podcasts, Google Music, Spotify, Stitcher, or anywhere fine podcasts are heard. Head over to failedtofail.com, find the page that coincides with this episode. And as always, I have links to any potent Instagram page, Facebook pages, as well as some photos of who we're talking to. So if you want to see Neil Doppes in all his glory and maybe some examples of some of his fine photos, head on over to failedtofail.com. And as always, please subscribe onto whatever vehicle of podcast you're listening to this through. And thank you guys so much. And we'll see you here in a few more episodes. Hey, Neil, thanks so much, man. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it, buddy. It's been great. Have a good night.
This has been a Digital 410 production.